Kai'Sa is currently the strongest and possibly only viable forecast in the meta, but playing her is so frustrating because she's very contested and it feels like you need to have that perfect econ or fortune start. And what if your fortune gets griefed? What do you do then? Well, in this episode of In Too Deep, we're going to hop on board the Magnus Carlsen of TFT himself, Huanmie from China, to learn more about Kai'Sa. We're going to cover all of the major points, including your early openings, how to play around fortune, what happens when fortune gets griefed, and how to do some crazy outplays in the late game. And yes, there are some crazy low and high roll moments in this game, but I promise you, you're going to learn a thing or two after this video is done. Hopping into the game, we're going to start off with upgraded champion, which means you get a 2-star champion of a 1-cost unit to start things off. And it looks like we got Kabuko as our champion, which is really fun. If you get the ability to start off with fortune, you get the ability to maybe get Lucky Paws, the hero augment that helps Kabuko scale and print you more gold. Checks the Exalted, and his Exalted is going to be all 2 costs, the one that has Gnar, Qiyana, Lux, just all 2 costs, which is also a really another good out to play for. If you hit 2 healthy, you can just reroll a bunch of 2 costs. Maybe go into AP with like Zyra, for example, or play around the Gnar. He's going to buy out his shop and not sell to make gold. He had the option of trying to play for a early 10 gold, but Kabuko 2 is worth holding in case he gets more fortune. 2 more Kabukos appear in the shop. Lucky Paws, anybody? I mean, that'd be really, really cool to see Lucky Paws game here. Sells his Aphelios immediately. I don't think he's interested in Fated, although he does buy the Ari pair. Interesting. I guess it's probably because he wants to sell the Aphelios to make gold. He doesn't have Aphelios items anyways. He's probably going to play around Kabuko, and we decided to hold the Lux as well. Let's go ahead and look at our augment choices here. Enter the Dragon is a little bit awkward right now because we don't have any Jannas or even Story Weavers to lean into the reroll comp. This is a really good, powerful augment to play that AP reroll line we talked about in a previous video to try and go for 3-star Janna, 3-star Zyra, or maybe playing around Soraka Zoe, mix and match depending on what you get. I think the start for it is okay with the items because you can slam things like the Spark and maybe even Steadfast, and then have your frontline items for Diana already solved. But you have no tiers. You don't really have a way to make Janna strong. You're going to lose a lot early game. So I think this is a weak spot for Enter the Dragon. Interestingly enough, I think Shock Treatment is a better start for things like Janna reroll or Zyra, Zoe, Soraka, because you get an item that's really powerful like a Static Shiv to get you early game damage, and then you could repurpose your items. Instead of going for Spark and Steadfast Heart, you can go for Shiv plus Jewel Gauntlet and then slam this Gargoyle Stone Plate. Then you still have the issue of you don't really have a good AP lean start at the moment. And I don't know if that is good enough to convince me to compete for it, but it's a good option to have in your back pocket if you want. Best Friends is generic, but it often leans into specific AD reroll because it gives you the attack speed. So you want to play it with like Senna and the Aphelios and a few other compositions. And we just sold that, so I don't think we're going to be going for it, but always something you could pick if you want generic combat power. We reroll all 3 augments, and I think that's totally fair. We get offered Stars Are Born, which is pretty funny because we get offered 5 copies of Kabuko, so it's not the Lucky Paws. I just realized he rerolled all his augments because you want to look for Lucky Paws, probably for the content. And also because this spot is pretty good for it. But Stars Are Born could be a consolation. He could find it as a way to get to Kabuko 3 really quickly and then use that to accelerate his tempo. Magic Wand is a lot better when you can slam a mana generation item because then you can accentuate the power of your cast. The problem with Magic Wand right now is that he doesn't have anything that generates mana, so he is going to take a while for things to cast, and it might cast like once per fight. And also, it doesn't really need it for specific item slam because you can already slam things like a Spark or a Crown Guard or Jewel Gauntlet. It doesn't really need that extra rod right now, so it's a little bit dead. And Ascension forces you to play a specific set of comps that want you to stall, like Fated, for example. So I don't really like Ascension as an early pick because it forces you down a path that you have to follow, and it's not even that good early. So he's going to go for Stars Are Born. And he immediately looks over the Exalted and realizes that he has 3 Exalted just in the shop. He has Qiyana, Lux, and Gnar. And those are all ways that he can play around Exalted. And now he gets to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We were talking about taking Stars Are Born for tempo and maybe hitting things like Kabuko 3 really early to push levels. And so now we're accomplishing multiple things, which is Stars Are Born gives us the ability to play around the Kabuko 3, but also get Exalted and print Econ every single turn with that EXP. So usually Stars Are Born to help you win streak, but instead he's using it to simultaneously try to hit a 3-star Kabuko and try to fast 9, which is really interesting. The only issue is that he's not really slamming items, and so he doesn't really have a lot of power right now. And I think it's because he doesn't want to commit to anything right now. Yes, certain items are generically good, like he can slam a frontline item, a Stone Plate Gargoyle, for example, and then put it onto Gnar, I guess Qiyana, but they're not particularly strong, and at best it would help preserve maybe 1 unit's worth of HP. So he says it's not worth slamming right now. And you can see, by the way, he's not picking up any other 2-star 1 cost that could potentially be really good for his composition because he wants to get that Kabuko 3. Whoa, 2-3, we get offered a Fortune as well. And I wonder if he's going to think about pivoting into Fortune here. At least check. I think a lot of times you should at least look at what your dice roll is to see how many turns. Ooh, 3. So that means that he could lose out the rest of the stage and then reevaluate at the minimum. He immediately sells his key on a 2. So a deviation, a pivot in stage 2 already, which instead of playing around the Exalted and trying to curve out with playing 2-star Exalted, printing gold every turn, and preserving HP this way, he says Fortune is a much faster accelerator, so he's going to play a stage 2-3 Fortune instead and lose 3. I wonder if he's going to push his luck, but I guess we're going to find out later. Also, he naturally has 2 EXP from the 2 rounds he played Exalted, so it's at least a good interval for him to sell and play around that core. Oh my god, it's also a 4-cost encounter, so he gets Kaisa. Real quick, let's use TFT Academy to break down what are the 3 most common variations of Kaisa you'll be seeing on ladder. The first is the highest cap version in S tier, Dragon Lord Kaisa. This is the hardest to hit, but the highest win rate comp because you're playing around powerful legendaries like Zaya, Azir, Udyr, and then using Orange your tank, which is very reliable. Then having a big AoE stun with 4 Dragon Lord, which hits the entire board, and in a burst-oriented meta, that is huge. Getting that stun gives you that extra second of damage that can swing the fight. The only problem is that it's really expensive, and you usually only play if you have an insane win streak, or you're playing around Fortune the entire game, and you cash out with a major amount of resources. The second variation in A tier, and the version you'll be seeing a lot more often, is 4 Bruiser, 4 Trickshot, because it's much cheaper to get online. As you're seeing, you're playing a lot more 2 costs and even Sivir as a 1 cost, and you have a lot more flexibility with how you actually piece together your front line. You don't have to play around 4 Bruiser. You could play 2 Bruiser plus Behemoth or something else depending on what you hit. But because there's a lot cheaper units in general, you should be able to hit this more reliably and play for top 4. Really good from ahead with win streak. Also still really good with Fortune, especially on stage 3. The last variation people play is 6 Ghostly Kaisa, which is fallen out of the meta a little bit. That's why it's B tier. But it's another thing that you could play as a backup option is 6 Ghostly, where you try to play around like Senna and you're rerolling Senna. You recognize that you're probably not going to go for that. What can you do? You can actually level and play around Kaisa instead and try to go for 6 Ghostly. But it's just in general a lot weaker and requires you to hit everything for the most part, which is going to be really hard because this comp is very expensive and it still has trouble competing with some of the best comps. All the summaries are here on TFT Academy, so if you want to find out more information, check out the website. And now gets rewarded for playing Fortune because it's a Fortune cash out into Kaisa and to push level 9 as fast as you can. That's exactly the strategy that he was looking for anyways, and one of the most powerful ways to approach the meta currently. Look at all the pings going down. All the Chinese players are like, oh my god, this is such a crazy encounter. Getting 4 cost early is insane. It's interesting that he went for Kaisa and not Annie as well, because he could theoretically think about going for Annie as soon as he could to try to get 5 Fortune, preserve their life, push his luck. But I think this is a nod to the fact that Kaisa is one of the most contested units to play around. And if he needs to stop playing for Fortune and start to win because he's bleeding too much or his spot is really good to win streak, he at least has that option now. Playing the Kabuko 1, trapping his units, taking out his Sivir, trying to weaken his board, going up against a Venerable Piggy Bank, which is a really powerful augment ever since they changed it. They buffed it now to give you 5 gold for losing, which is kind of insanity. Just look at this person, 2-5, 40 gold, gets another 5 for losing. Oh dear, this is not good. Huanmie actually wins his fight, so his Fortune cash out is griefed. Oh, we talked about how Fortune, you really want to lose streak, so you can just look at the pain in his face in the bottom right. Huanmie is not happy about this. And so things were looking kind of okay, right? Like we had the 2 Exalted, so we got 2 free gold to start things off. Then we had Fortune, which would line up really nicely with the end of the round. But now we lost our Fortune streak. And so he plays Kaisa and just plays a stronger version of his board. It's not his strongest board, but he still keeps Fortune in. And now he slams items Declaw plus a Steadfast Heart to try and see if he can kill 1 extra unit. He doesn't think this is going to win the fight, but hopefully it helps lead to an extra HP. Oh no, unfortunately we don't end up killing any units. Oh god, this is a little bit of a disaster so far. Huanmie immediately pushes his luck, says, you know what? I need to get something good going in order to come back into this game. Small note, by the way, Huanmie didn't sell things like his EXP core in the previous rounds because he doesn't want to push levels nearly as aggressively because he wanted to be weak. Oh, we found a Kabuko too, so now we are 1 Kabuko off from the Kabuko 3. This is what we were waiting for with Stars Are Born. Huanmie also found an early Galio, so he has a Story Weaver to also play into, which is a nice complement to Kabuko. Trickshot with Teemo to match with Sivir, Bruiser with Galio to match with Kabuko. Plays the Galio, trying to kill even more units because last fight we played the Kabuko 2 with items. We didn't kill a single unit. So we should be able to at least play this Galio and maybe preserve more HP. Oh, and then the second disaster happens. Do we win this fight? It's actually really close. And winning this fight means that we are no longer getting another Fortune lose streak going. This is not the ideal Fortune start at all. How many times have you guys been playing Fortune and you just like win, lose, and just feel like Fortune's not even worth it? Really fascinating spot here for Huanmie. All right, let's pause here on these augments and talk about it. So we have Cybernetic Bulk. It's okay of a pick. You get some items maybe from Fortune, assuming he either gets items from the cash out. And encounters in general give you a lot of items. So I don't think Cybernetic Bulk is ever really a bad pick. There's a lot of different things you can use to also make your frontline a little bit better. If you're playing like a little bit of Wardens, a little bit of Behemoths, they benefit from extra HP. So, okay. Harm Assist, also okay. Something that gets better in the late stages of the fight. It's a lot better for melee carries as opposed to range carries. This set, though, there is a lot of backline access, so Harm Assist isn't bad for your backline carries like Kai'Sa. That being said, I like Inspiring Epitaph a lot better. It scales into the late game really nicely based on your HP. And because Inspiring Epitaph also gives them the attack speed, it might end up stacking onto Kai'Sa and make her very powerful late game. So I like Epitaph right now out of all these combat augments. Huanmie rolls options 1 and 2, and I think Crown Guard is just too weak right now. He doesn't really do anything for his current composition, and it's not something that he wants to play for an AP carry late game. Crown Guard is really good on like Silas or like a Nico hero augment, things like that. Not really that insane. And then Salvage Bin is just going to be really dizzy and not offering him enough. I don't think that item printing is high enough quality, and so he's just going to go for Inspiring Epitaph here, which makes sense. So Huanmie is very focused on the late game right now. He says he's going to play for Fortune. Don't worry about the immediate power spike of Salvage Bin and items. Just focus purely on the late game right now. You could slam an item here, go for a Rageblade or a Shiv. Archangels is pretty off the table because he really needs to find items for Kai'Sa, but the problem is none of these items are good for Kai'Sa. He has so much AP leaning items at the moment. We have an encounter coming up as well, so let's see what happens here. Kindred offers you an item temporarily, and looks like we're going to go for a Warmogs to try to preserve a little bit more HP. Warmogs also scales better because he has Inspiring Epitaph. Hand of Justice is actually something he could have picked as well and put it onto his Kai'Sa, but right now, he's trying to play it slow and think about how he can try and slowly bleed out. Having things like Warmogs will help him kill more units. Things like Hand of Justice might end up even being too strong and winning the fight because his Kai'Sa gets too powerful. He's going up against the Storyweaver board and seeing if he can kill one extra unit here. Okay, so we lost by 4 units. Usually the ratio I'm thinking about is half the team size. So if it's like 6 units, I want to lose by like 3, so on and so forth. Goes for a glove off carousel, so you can go for Last Whisper. That is a really important item for Kai'Sa right now in general. If you don't have armor reduction on Kai'Sa, it's going to be really hard to kill things in the late game. So he's just thinking about his late game items. The one thing I would like to see Huanmie do is try to stack some of his units a little bit more so he can try to get better positioning to kill units. For example, you could put Sivir on top of Kai'Sa and then stack these units a little bit more towards the corner so they can focus fire, and that gives you more chances of killing units. It could be that he's worried about winning because he has won a couple of rounds, unfortunately, but that is a more efficient way to focus fire and kill units, and that might be the difference between getting a little bit more HP, which ultimately is the amount of lives that you can preserve for your Fortune cash out. He's at 47 life right now, so it's looking a little bit on the dicier side, but I think it's still okay. Allow gives you 8 free rerolls. And he has the option of rolling at 6 or leveling to 7 and rolling, which is a little bit awkward to roll at 6 because the odds that he hits things like Kai'Sa is a lot worse. He also can do something really clever. He can actually choose to roll after the round has started for combat because he doesn't want to get that strong. And so now that's actually what he does. He waits for the combat to start, levels to 7, and then picks up the rolls, has acquired an extra Kai'Sa. And I really like this play from Huanmie, guaranteeing that he's going to lose this time. Says, you know what? I griefed my streak enough. I'm just going to guarantee that I lose. Level after the round has started and then roll. So that way, if I upgrade, I'm not going to become too strong. And now it's going to cash out at 24, which is okay because 24 still gives you the option for getting an item, which he did. He gets a powerful artifact item. And now you can play for a really strong artifact onto Kai'Sa. She loves things like Mana Zane, Sniper's Focus, Infinity Force, so on and so forth. So things are looking okay-ish so far. The only problem is that her HP is kind of low, but he has Kai'Sa pair, so if he can hit one more Kai'Sa, he is good to go. Ooh, unfortunately, we opened our anvil and we don't hit any good Kaisa items. I guess we could just take more frontline items like a Hull Crusher. I think that's always fine. And then you can make a Morello to provide some anti-heal utility. You can also take Zhonya's. I don't know if Zhonya's is particularly really good on Kaisa. That doesn't sound like it'd be that insane, but it might actually be a decent secondary item on a carry that isn't Kaisa. But it looks like he's going to go for the Hull Crusher instead and a Morello like we talked about. Huanmie sacks another round. He ended up pivoting out of Fortune. So he's trying to win as many fights as he can. Let's take a look at his 4-2 augments. Baboom is not very good for Kaisa unless she has Mana Zane because she's not casting twice very quickly. Baboom is really good for carries that rely on things like blue buff because you spam cast a lot and then you're able to get that damage amplification. Kaisa takes a long time to ramp up, so not really good. Maybe if you had Mana Zane, but probably not. Trash to Treasure is really good generically because it just converts a bunch of your items to Ornn items. And in general, Kaisa trick shots use a lot of Ornn items really well because Kaisa is a very versatile user of the artifacts, as we mentioned, with, you know, things like Sniper's Focus, Mana Zane, Infinity Force, so on and so forth. And then you can get a lot of frontline ones that are really good, like Eternal Winter. Roll of Dice is also generically good as well, but it's a really powerful tempo-based augment, and you need something much more decisively stronger right now, because who's going to hold the Radiant Thieves right now? Probably not Kaisa. Maybe like a 4-cost melee champion like Sylas? I don't know. We don't even have a Sylas at the moment, so I think it's kind of weaker at the moment. Okay, we roll twice, and we get Accomplice, which is generically a really powerful prismatic augment. In fact, I think Accomplice might be the most powerful prismatic augment in general right now in the game. And Golden Egg, which I think is just trolling. If you take Golden Egg at 20 HP, you're just doing it for the content, or you're just trying to have fun, or you're tilted and you just don't really care about your LP. 20 HP is just unacceptable to take it at this point. So it's down to Accomplice or Trash to Treasure. I think Accomplice is a lot better earlier because not only do you get the power of the double support items, but you also get the 4 gold to help get your economy online. And then Trash to Treasure is something that he could also reforge items that he doesn't want. So for example, you remember that Hull Crusher that it was kind of awkward? He could reforge that. It's actually a cool little tip where you can use Trash to Treasure on completed items and an artifact to reforge it as long as you use it on one completed item. So he goes with Trash to Treasure after debating it for a while, and he could reforge things that he doesn't really want, like the Dragon Claw and the Steadfast Heart, which are okay items, but not amazing. He's rolling really heavily on 8 to see if he can get Kaisa 2, which he does. That's a huge pickup. Reforges and gets pretty solid Kaisa item in Infinity Force and the Anima Visage. Gonna pop these items and reforge as well. Oh, interesting. He's gonna reforge the Infinity Force and I guess try to go for a really strong defensive item like Eternal Winter. That's really surprising to me that he decided to go for that instead of put the 3rd item onto Kaisa. My guess is that he really feels like his frontline is too fragile and doesn't have enough time to stall for the Kaisa. So he wanted to reforge for more frontline items. That's fascinating. I know a lot of players would just be like, oh, Infinity Force, just put that on Kaisa and then move on. All right, we're still rolling here on 8 to see if we can stabilize. Finds a double Udyr shop on 8. That is insane. How do we get that in though right now? Reforges the Morello and finds a Sniper's Focus, which is really strong as well. Sniper's Focus, I think, is one of the strongest items for Kaisa, so that's really insane. Oh, interesting. Decides to go for Udyr to get the tattoo, finds Tattoo of Toxin, and so he reforged his Morellonomicon, realizing that he has Tattoo of Toxin, so he doesn't need that Morello for anti-heal. It's a really good heads-up play because if you have Morello and you have your tattoo, you don't need that anti-heal. Pops his item before the carousel, which is a nice little trick for him to know what item he can get off carousel. But look at what's on carousel. He has an Udyr 2. So we got completely bailed out by this Udyr 2. I mean, he already has a good setup with the Kaisa, but now he hits Udyr 2, and that's a huge spike for him now. Hitting Udyr 2 on 8, I mean, that's just ridiculous. Now you can go for another Reforge as well. Reforge the Sniper's Focus and the Zhonya's, finds Diamond Hands and another Infinity Force. Infinity Force onto the Udyr, and then he can go Diamond Hands, and the Gambler's Blade's a little bit awkward because it's not very powerful, doesn't have a lot of gold, doesn't have a gold holder of it. Man, so much has happened, so let's break down during this fight what we just watched turn by turn. So 4-2, he leveled up, rolled at 8 to hit Kaisa 2. He picked Trash to Treasure and then recognized that he doesn't need a 3rd item for his Kaisa because he has a Tattoo of Toxin. Knew that that tattoo was going to be on Kaisa, so he could also use that Trash to Treasure to reforge that Morello and his frontline items to get better items in general, because on average, the Ornn item that you get from the artifacts are better than the average common item that you get. It's way better to get things like stacking Anima Visage, Eternal Winter, and Hull Crusher than, Bramble Declaw, hits an Udyr, and then doesn't stack his Udyr immediately because he wants to go for better Udyr items. And then he chooses not to reforge his items onto Kaisa, which I think is a really key play. A lot of people, when they get Trash to Treasure, reforge everything. And then they give up their only source of shred and anti-heal, and they say, why am I not doing damage in the late game? I think that's a really good play because the thing about artifacts is, yes, it's stronger than the average item, but it doesn't provide you any possible way of armor sundering or magic resistance shredding. So by keeping things like the Last Whisper and playing around the Tattoo of Toxin, he'll guarantee you have shred and anti-heal, and then he can play around the rest of the Ornn items. Don't be too greedy of reforging everything and try to go for maximum Ornn value in every single scenario. So I like the fact that he's not going crazy on the greed here. Gonna reforge Gamera's Blade and Declaw and see what else he gets. Another Infinity Force, which is really good, and also a Sniper's Focus. So now he can item remove and put the Last Whisper onto a Bard instead. Interesting. So now he saved his item remover for this very moment, so that way he can put another good item and now put the Last Whisper off of Kaisa and hopefully put that onto Xayah in the future. This is actually really smart because the trick shot will bounce no matter what on the Bard, and so he's getting the armor reduction from that Bard holding Last Whisper, and now he can stack the Kaisa with just straight up damage items now. Yorick is the encounter that reduces his reroll, so now he can get to 9, and his rerolls are going to cost 1. So if he levels here, it looks like it's an off interval, but that's okay because he'd much rather roll for 1 gold as opposed to 2, so his rolls are worth double. And right now he's just looking purely for Xayah because Xayah is the trick shot that wants to hold this Last Whisper. And also he's at 20 HP, so yes, he does want to try to maximize his economy and roll and hit Kaisa, but the reality is he's at 2 lives and he wants to stay at 2 lives because he is streaking, and if he loses that streak, he's going to lose a ton amount of gold, and he's going to be down to 1 life, which is a really bad combo. Going up against Zyra 3 and Zoe 3, so the Exalted player ended up playing around the 2-cost reroll, which is a really strong build. You can see why that comp is really strong right now. We roll and we find double Xayah, and so our comp is functionally done for now. The way that this can get stronger is we pivot it into like more Dragon Lord centric, but that is a very hard pivot to do right now. So I think this is our comp for pretty much the rest of the game because we still have a lot of upgrades like Silas and Riven and other things like that. Going up against Azir Hui, AP Fast 9. That person has 2 duplicators on the bench as well. The opponent is very strong, but it looks like our front line is just holding on. Oh God, wait, never mind. Oh, never mind on the never mind. Our Udyr clutched it. Oh man. These fights are so close. Man, that Udyr 2 just showing why it's really clutch. Xayah 2 on Carousel. Does he get a Xayah 2? Okay, no, he's not first pick, so unfortunately can't get everything 2-starred on Carousel. It doesn't matter what item he picks here. You can reforge it with Trash to Treasure. So you can pick the best champion or maybe deny an opponent an item. Okay, Riven 2 is nice. Just more meat in front of our Kaisa and our Xayah. One thing to note, by the way, is he is positioning a little bit greedily to maximize his DPS. He has Sivir in front of the Xayah. This is because Sivir buffs in front and behind as well as to the left and right. She has an adjacent buff, which is really important to note so that you can have some late game positioning options. But he's not putting the Sivir in front of the Kaisa because that could potentially trap her and put her in a spot where she's not able to actually attack anything. Scouting around, pretty much everyone is online. Another Kaisa board, an AP reroll, a 7-star Reaver board that has Irelia. Everybody is online and very strong right now. Looks like he's going to try to avoid positioning into the Kayle. People are positioning Kayle in the second row so that they can attack the backline carry very quickly and burst it. Once they get past your front line, the Kayle will focus onto the corner unit that's the carry and try to AoE it down. Going up against a Xayah 2 and a Kaisa 2, and it was such a close fight. Uh-oh, we end up losing, and we're now down to 7 HP. Holy moly, this is actually so close. 7, 7, 7, 12. Okay, so we're now down to 1 life. We get another Ornn item if we want. We're stuck on Gallia 1, and now we're still stuck on Xayah 1. A lot of Xayahs are out of the pool. Uh-oh. Is this where we stop? We high rolled this hard just to get a top 4. We reforge another item, and we get another Hull Crusher and then Death Defiance. And there is one more play available to Huanmie, which is the ability to reforge all of the Ornn items straight up. Let's say he just wants to reforge this. He'll lose the Reforger, but he gets one final reforge that's available to him if he wants it. He positioned and swapped sides against the Story Weaver player, just trying to move away from the Kayle, and it looks like it paid off. The Kayle is not focusing our back line until the very end of the fight, and I think that our positioning swap at the last second was really good. Nicely done. And now we're top 2. That's a really crucial win, and now we're heads up and going into the last fight. sells the Zaya to try to roll to see if we can hit the Galio. We do miss. And at this point, we're in a really tough spot. Sells the Galio. What are we rolling for at this point? Oh my god. Wait, what is this? We put the Hull Crushers on the backline Zaya instead. This is to make the Zaya tankier and also to bait the trick shot. We're separating our backline so the trick shots don't double bounce onto our backline units. And we swapped our Udyr on the other side to get to the Zaya. The opponent did the same exact thing. They separated their Zaya and their Kaisa to try to make sure the trick shot doesn't bounce onto them. Oh my god, the Zaya is actually so tanky. Wait a second. This totally won him the fight. Dude, what a crazy play. He sold his Zaya pair, sold his Galio pair, and put tank items onto his backline to get the win. Wait a second. We're going to rewatch this fight because we can't just blow past what we watched. So let's go ahead and break down this positioning before it starts. Trick shots tend to bounce immediately to the target next to whoever they're focus firing. So in this case, the trick shot will shoot onto the Silas, bounce onto this Aatrox, and then search for another nearest unit, which tends to be some of these backline units. And so whoever you're positioned to trick shot in tends to be on the same side of who they're going to bounce and assassinate. So that's why separating these backline units is really key, because if we have our Zaya here in the backline where Teemo is, for example, the Kaisa will bounce, and maybe assassinate the Zaya, or maybe bounce and hit this Kaisa as well. And so both players are doing that, which is a really good check. The second thing to think about is the fact that Huanmie also had this Udyr in the top corner ready to run past. And then if he ends up dying, he revives right here in the middle and then will jump onto the Zaya. So that's a really good setup because he's trying to have the Udyr run to the back line. And he's taking advantage of the fact that best friends positioning will always kind of force him to position in a really awkward way and not really protect the Zaya, because his opponent basically has to decide whether or not he wants to get best friends value or lose that to protect his carries. Okay, so the fight is starting. We're watching this in slightly slower motion. The first burst from the enemy Kaisa is going to clean up a lot of our smaller units that are not as relevant. And you can see, by the way, Teemo died, right? So this is partially why we want to avoid this Kaisa, because that trick shot bounce eliminate our backline units. Our Kaisa is firing, killing a bunch of their useless units as well. And now it's basically the stars left, right? We have Silas as our main tank unit. Our Udyr's alive, and our Kaisa and our Zaya are still alive as well as their units. But Udyr is now revived and is jumping onto the Zaya, as we mentioned. And then for the second half of this fight, watch this Kaisa trick shot damage not actually do anything to the Zaya. You see how this Ink Shadow is actually pathing all the way to Zaya, but because of the bounces and it's reducing damage and because of the Hull Crusher giving her defensive stats, it's barely doing anything and she's able to actually withstand that damage. Watching it one more time, the cast here and the Inspiring Epitaph shielding her just doesn't end up draining her enough, and that stall gives all the time in the world for this Udyr to barely get in, assassinate the enemy Kaisa, and this Zaya just doesn't die. Man, that is such a crazy outplay and something I would not have thought about. Truly 5-head genius mode from Huanmie. Dude, that's so crazy of a play. I'm actually learning more things by watching the fight like 3 or 4 times and breaking it down yet again. It's so crazy what Huanmie was able to pull off to get that win in that mirror. He was down Zaya 2. He was down 2-star Gal in the front line. So a lot of people feel like they're helpless and they just keep stacking more tanks. But the foresight that he used to capitalize on his immediate items of double Hull Crusher and play for a situational spot to outplay his opponent was incredible. This is why Huanmie is a seeing GOAT. Many people call him the Magnus Carlsen of TFT, and I truly am starting to believe that at this point. So hopefully now you have an extra tool up your sleeve and in your arsenal so that you can win some of those Kaisemirs in case you find yourself in those heads-up plays. What do you think of Huanmie's play? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.